Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Thank you for joining us for today's event, AI and the Circular Economy. Imagining just, technology-empowered material stewardship in communities of the future. Just to help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube live from Fourth Space, and we are located here on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. At Fourth Space, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge. We co-create daily activities that examine research questions, projects happening across the university. We're also running today's event as a live stream Zoom meeting. So those of you joining us there, we would love comments and questions via the chat. We'll do our best to read those out later on. Those of you here in the space, if you have any comments, questions, raise your hand. We'll bring a microphone over to you so that everyone can hear. Okay, with that, it's now my pleasure. Pass the microphone over to current Concordia Public Scholar, doctoral candidate in the individualized program, Faisal Shennib. Faisal, it's great to have you.
Thank you. All right. So welcome everybody. Really appreciate you coming out in person or joining us online. So today we're here to talk about AI and the circular economy. My name is Faisal, and we're joined by some wonderful guests in person and virtually. So I'll just say their names quickly, and then I'll let them go into a deeper introduction of themselves later on when we get into the panel discussion. But we've got Jessica here with us today, Jessica Winton. We've got Arrien Weeks in person as well. And Burcu is joining us online. So yes, just a little bit about myself. I am a PhD candidate in the individualized program here at Concordia and a public scholar. My research area of focus is applications of data-driven technologies to help nudge us towards more circular economy and better waste management. So I really look at applying technologies at the local community scale, not so much at the recycling center, and really thinking about these technologies critically, and measuring their impact potentially beneficially as well as their harms. And also trying to deploy and implement some of these technologies in our actual communities. So really trying to create this stuff and test them out. And a lot of my philosophy is about engagement and getting people involved. And that's what I would like today to be like, if possible. That's my goal is really to have an engaged conversation with our panelists, as well as with people in the audience, so in person and virtually. It's not supposed to be an overly technical conversation, but you're welcome to dive into technical questions if you like. It's meant to be a moment to imagine together, really. That's why I have that subtitle that is so long and wordy that Douglas did a really good job of executing. Anyway, so without further ado today, I'll do a little slide presentation to give us some context, and then we'll do some discussion, and then a little bit of demos, and we're going to get to play a waste sorting game that Jessica invented called Waste Invaders, which is really fun and teaches you about waste sorting, but also keeps track of the performance. So it's also a measurement tool. Super interesting. Anyway, without further ado, I guess we'll jump onto the slides. Okay, so there it is again, AI and the circular economy, imagining just technology-empowered material stewardship in communities of the future. So yes, it's a mouthful, but I thought it was important to get all those words in there. We're talking about justice, we're talking about material stewardship, and we're talking about the future. So we're really here to imagine all of those factors. Just an overview of what we're gonna touch on today. I'll explain my understanding of circular economy and then which subset of circular economy we're talking about today, because it is a broad topic. Same thing with AI. AI is a very broad topic, and it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So I want us to just like rev up our imaginations a little bit by touching on some of the applications we've seen. Sometimes we tend to hyper-focus on particular examples of AI, and there's a lot of different kinds of AI. So I think it's important to run through that quickly. Then I'll introduce the OpenWaste.ai project, which is the banner we use for the research project that Jessica is involved in, that we're trying to test out at Concordia, and that we want to be sort of like a template for how we can move forward as a society in terms of an open way to deal with data and materials. Then I'll go through a couple of the examples of how we might use AI for circular economy, and then we'll dive into our panel discussion. Feel free to ask questions after that. And feel free to, like, as we're discussing the panel questions, if you have your own answer to those questions, you're also welcome to weigh in on those questions. And then stick around afterwards. We'll be here until 4 o'clock, playing Waste Invaders, talking, chatting. And we've got a QR code if you want to scan it at the front, if you're interested in getting involved. So I'll remind anybody here at any point, at multiple points today, please feel free to sign up to participate in this project, because it's meant to be for all of us. Okay, so circular economy, what is that, and what version are we talking about today? Well, circular economy can touch on, often on materials, but also on energy. It's basically about a different way of running our economy that is not linear, right? That doesn't extract and then dispose, but rather circulates things. And so this diagram here, the butterfly diagram, is a famous one created through the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Some of you have probably seen it before. On the right side, you've got your finite materials. It's also considered the technical sphere of materials, things that we run out of, that don't regenerate themselves. And then on the left, we've got the renewables. We've got the organic materials that can potentially regenerate themselves, but you still have to take care in how we're managing them. And so this diagram is full of arrows looping. And the idea is that really a good circular economy direction is one in which we're looping materials and energy as close to the site of consumption and production as possible, right? So those circles are tighter and tighter rather than more global or more linear. And so today, we're really not talking about that big scale circular economy. We're really talking about imagining as close to us as possible. So where you and I consume and dispose of materials within our communities, within our workplaces, within the businesses we frequent. And why is that our scale? Why am I focusing on that scale? I think that's a really important thing to address. A lot of people might say, well, that's not where the impact is. And that is somewhat true. But it is a very important entry point for individuals and communities, right? We all deal with materials. We all consume things, buy things, and we all dispose of things. And so when it comes to sustainability and thinking about it, this is my experience, is that it's one of the easiest ways for us to get involved and engaged. And it's one of the easiest ways for us to make an impact, actually, because it just takes a few ingredients. You just need some space, people, maybe some funding, and materials. And so we're going to talk about a very magical incarnation of those materials coming together called the Concordia University Center for Creative Reuse, which Arrien is a co-founder of. I also helped support and start up. And we also have Anna here in our audience today, who's also the founder of that. Basically, the concept is very simple. We have it at Concordia. It's a space. It was an unwanted space. So we're also sort of circular economying that space in a fun way. That's not a verb. I made that up. Anyway, yeah, basically we took an unwanted space, filled it with the unwanted materials that Concordia generates from all sorts of activities, right? A university is a huge, varied, community of activities. So you're not just generating one kind of material like a business might, you're generating everything, basically. And so it's really an interesting challenge to collect those things, showcase them in a desirable way, and then invite people to come and collect them and make use of them, because they would have just been thrown out. So if you think about this flow that way, there's so much potential. I mean, otherwise we're just throwing money and value in the landfill, or worse yet, incinerating it. We can do so much more. So Concordia University Center for Creative Reuse has helped save the community. Sorry, I went a bit ahead of myself. I'm going forwards when I should be going back, sorry. Has helped save the community almost $500,000. We just tabulated that for the first time in a while, over the 8 years of its existence. We make sure that everybody who takes materials out of there tells us how much they would have spent to buy those materials. And we also weigh the weight of the material going out, so that's for our environmental impact. But the social and economic impact is super interesting to think about. And so think about this happening on a daily basis all over our communities. We're just consuming materials, and it's just not incentivized or convenient enough for us to do better with them. Maybe you sell them if they're really worth something, but maybe not. They just sit in your house until you're ready to move, or you need to make some space, and then they're gone. And you never know if somebody near you might need that material. So what is the environmental impact of this way of dealing with materials, where we don't prioritize pausing materials, giving it a second home? It's really hard for us to know. Actually, we don't have great data on this. So that's something that my research touches on, is how well are we actually tracking waste in general? And a subset of that question is all of these other materials that are not like packaging that we throw in our recycling, or food waste that we throw in compost, all of our little appliances and do-whats and construction material and everything else. If you look at the latest waste audits done in Quebec, they say it's around 15% of what was audited at the time they audited, right? Those are just like spotlight moments where we look at what's being thrown out and we try to determine how much of that landfilled waste could have been reused. So that's a substantial amount, 15%. It's probably more, because we probably have way more stuff that's sitting in our homes that we're not throwing out because, well, we don't need to. It can just sit around, right? And in moving season, we see a little moment of that happen, where we see an additional 50,000 tons of waste thrown out in Quebec just during those couple of weeks. And that's 3% of the province's total yearly trash. So that gives you a little window into all of that hidden waste that's gonna get thrown out eventually, but that we should be doing better with, right? Okay, so let's move on to AI. What kinds of AI are we talking about today? Okay, there's the sort of future self-aware general intelligence AI. We're not talking about that. That's on the right side of these categories, and that doesn't exist yet anyway. What we're talking about are, in theory, simple, but actually in practice, there's a lot of complexity that goes into creating them. They're called, narrow AI applications. It's where you're taking a bunch of data to train a model, and it's either just really simply outputting a result based on some statistical algorithms and learning, or it has some limited memory in the sense that it's learning a little bit as it goes. So the more you use it, the more it learns, like your ChatGPT bot might learn and actually spit out different results as you go. So those are the general categories we're talking about today. And the general process of training an AI, just so everybody's on the same page, this is a very simplified version, but you're basically just getting a lot of data, you're preparing it for the training process, you're running that training of the model so that it's exposed to the data and the answers that associate with the data. And then you test it on another set of data that it hasn't been exposed to yet. You see if it does more or less what you were looking for it to do, and then you continue to improve it. So that's a huge simplification, but that is what the process of training AI is. Okay, I'm sure we can get into the details, we won't. What are some examples of some of the applications of AI and things that we think of? Okay, there's generative AI and large language models. That's what I feel like everybody is thinking about these days, right? It's your ChatGPT, your image generation, you can even do audio generation. It's a lot of this generative AI applications. But that's not all AI is, right? And as we go through the years, different things kind of hit the spotlight. Like in past years, I think we talked more about computer vision and classification models. So this is where we're using cameras in pairing with our computing systems to train models that can actually identify objects for different applications, right? You can see this in retail stores where maybe you can have a self-checkout system based on just like you grab the thing from a fridge and it knows what it was and it charges you automatically on your account. It can be for inventorying, it can be a lot of different things. Well, anyway, in those applications of computer visions, we generally have image classification, which is what does this image generally have in it? So what class is this image? You can have a localization of the object in the image, and then you can have both, where it's localizing it and identifying what images are in there or what objects are in there, and that's object detection. So just so we get some of the nomenclature out of the way. There's also recommender systems. We also don't talk about that much these days, but that was a hotter topic in past years when it comes to digital media consumption, like your Netflix account or your listening, your Spotify account. Recommendations are made based on databases of listening behavior and what kinds of patterns people follow. And it tries to recommend things that other people tend to do as well that you might want to do. Same thing for shopping, right? Amazon, recommends things for you to buy and actually, works counterproductively towards what we're talking about today. And then there's, social media as well, right? It's all very fluid, but pretty much everything you're seeing on your feed is part of a recommender algorithm. It's all coming through based on what you've consumed and what they think you might want to consume more, just with the goal of keeping you around, maybe getting some ad clicks, et cetera. Okay, so that was like a really whirlwind overview of AI. That's not everything, there's more. But hopefully that gets the juices flowing in terms of like imagining what circular economy means and then what AI can mean and how we might be using it towards helping us with our goals. Okay, then there's this project we have called Open Waste, and where we're imagining a future where materials that we're currently mostly just throwing away are utilized way better, right? And where we're really collectively taking ownership of this potential, but using a layer of data and technology to help us do better. And there's a lot of points in which this technology can connect, right? It can be us as individuals at home with our cell phones. It can be smart waste bins. It can be waste containers. It can be institutional points of connection like local reuse centers, or even slightly bigger, right? We can have communication flowing between waste collectors and people, right? Like, let's say problematic material are being thrown out, and there's like a feedback loop to individuals to help nudge them not to do that anymore. Anyway, the point is that there's this whole layer of technology that we haven't added. Is it a good idea to start adding that? In what contexts? And how can all of this data then be used to help us do better? So this is a very broad, like utopian kind of diagram that doesn't say much necessarily, but hopefully gets you to start thinking about the different contexts and the potential for mining data and using AI for circular economy. Okay, we'll take a moment to breathe here. So let's get into a few actual potential applications of AI for circular economy. And as we're going through this, I want you to try to reflect on some of these questions. So these are questions we'll ask the panelists in different kinds of ways, but I think it's important for us all to think about. So first of all, most obviously, what is the problem that this AI application I'm going to show you is actually solving? Is it actually solving a problem, or is it just applying AI to something for the sake of it, right? And you know what? I'm going to show you stuff and ideas that might be really terrible ideas. I'm going to say that out the gate, and I've had a lot of pushback on some of these ideas, but I think it's important that we talk about them. So feel free to criticize and critique and let us know if you think this is a terrible idea. Second of all, is the environmental benefit going to outweigh the environmental cost? Now, that's not something you can do just off the top of your head, but you can maybe get a sense of it and definitely be thinking about it. Is this the kind of application that people would be motivated to participate in, and why? And then think about who would be able to participate and who wouldn't. Let's also think about the data, right? Because that is such a critical part of the AI process, as we talked about. What are the challenges with collecting this data? And what are the risks that might be associated with collecting this data? Can this application of AI be misused? And then more kind of long-term, what organizational structure would we need to support this solution or these solutions in general, right? Because these things can't just exist on their own. So they're either businesses or they're things that we invest in as communities, but what structure would that look like? Okay, this is a very commonly thought of application of AI for waste and circular economy. Up top on the left, there's this picture of a top-down view of waste on a conveyor belt. That's waste being detected on a conveyor belt at a sorting facility. So that's a lot of where the first applications we saw happening. It's basically to help robots better sort waste. But imagine we did this application more at a local context. So smart bins could implement this and help people sort their waste better. There could be a gamification component if you are sorting your waste better. And actually, that has started to exist. And you're going to see it in a future slide. We can have the same technology in a mobile app. This is like a very early incarnation of one we tried to develop. So there, it's telling you very obviously that bottle is plastic, but more useful, it would tell you what to do with that, right? Depending on the context you're in and the type of plastic it is. Is it recyclable or not, or maybe even refundable? Now we have new legislation in Quebec where this bottle is actually worth some money, so you might want to take it back for some consignment. Another application of this is not just to give feedback, but also to track waste, right? So on the left there is a video of a waste audit I conducted many years ago here at Concordia University. It's a very manual and difficult process of sorting through samples of collected trash, recycling, compost, to be able to say how much of what's going in there should be going there and shouldn't be going in there. And so you actually have to weigh the results after you categorize them into all the correct categories. And that gives you a very, very particular snapshot of what's going into your waste. You can see the problem with it. One, it takes a lot of people. These are mostly volunteers who are here sorting the waste. You have to pay somebody to coordinate it. You have to collect the samples. It's dangerous. It's smelly. It's dirty, et cetera, et cetera. So this doesn't happen that much because it's very difficult to do. And that means we just don't have a lot of great data on waste. We do track the weight of waste very frequently. We get that figure back from waste collectors. You can implement sensors that track weight in waste bins, but it's really important to know whether we're actually throwing the right things in the right bins. And so this other company, Intuitive AI, based out of the West Coast in Canada, actually does do this now. And they provide this solution as a company to other companies, mostly. I mean, institutions as well, but Pepsi and them have a deal now where we're going to start to see these maybe popping up more in corporate settings and institutional settings. Okay. What if we did the same thing at a reuse center? So this is our Concordia University Center for Creative Reuse. We have a checkout station where we ask everybody to weigh the materials they're taking away, as well as do that estimate I told you about, where we ask them how much they would have spent. So what if we stuck a microcomputer and a camera up there, and it looked down on what was being taken away and detected what we were throwing out, and then helped us accurately track not only how much we were taking away, but what we were taking out of that center. And maybe we can generate some better ecological impact assessments of that. There could be different benefits as well of using computer vision in the reuse center. We could also do inventorying potentially. I mean, Sucker is not a very standardized kind of layout of materials, right? There are categories of things in different places, but it's a lot of work, right? To know what's coming in and actually detecting that and tracking that. So maybe that's another application. We've also talked about the fact that this reuse that happens in the center also happens informally in our collection bins. People come up to the bins and they take things out. And we recently learned somebody had been doing that for, I don't know how long, like a year or more, or years. Who knows how much impact they've had without us being able to track the impact of that reuse. And so a theme in reuse is that we just don't track reuse very well. And so it's very hard to justify reuse projects or say what the impact is if we're not tracking it. And so that's why that was always an important part of Sucker's planning, was that we would track as best as we could the project's impact. So what if we could ask people to track what they take away using the mobile phone app that helped them estimate the weight of what they were taking away? I mean, I don't know, people maybe feel comfortable estimating weights. I'm terrible at it. Maybe this app could help them. Or maybe this is sort of a useless application, I'm not sure. But definitely having a scale next to every waste bin that we have is going to be an expensive undertaking and maybe not possible. Okay, then there's the idea of recommender systems. Remember we talked about Netflix and your social media stream. Well, what if those kinds of databases where you have a lot of data on your consumption of media or consumption of things you buy, well, what if we had data on reuse, feeding algorithms to understand reuse patterns and nudging us to reuse better? Or maybe we could even use the data about what we buy to inform reuse, because that data is out there. So instead of using it for buying new stuff, we use it for getting reused stuff. Another totally new idea. What if a model can be trained to help people with their reuse goals? Okay, so you come into the Creative Reuse Center and there's expertise there. The staff there are very knowledgeable. and they can help guide you on your project. And that is an important part of visiting Sucker. And maybe it's a reason why we're not reusing more, right? We just don't have that expertise. You can Google search things, but maybe there's a way for that knowledge to get transformed into an AI assistant. Maybe that's a bad idea, I'm not sure. Can we, like we said, like instead of buying new, I was at the dollar store, I could have bought, these headphones, or maybe, my local reuse center has these headphones, same with Tupperware or whatever. There's all sorts of moments where we're buying things and maybe we just don't need to be buying them. Maybe somebody, a neighbor, has what you're looking for. So this is a Quebec app called Partage Club that is based out of Quebec. And people can post things that they want to share. So it's sort of like Facebook Marketplace, but more based around sharing rather than selling. And it's more about, and then you rate each other and like your reliability and all that stuff. So what if there was a layer of AI helping to nudge people's participation in apps like this? Okay, I've gone through a bunch of examples. Hopefully I've filled your brain with ideas or skepticism. And now we can move on to chatting about this stuff. Okay. So first of all, I'd love for our panelists to take a moment to introduce themselves and maybe just let us know a little bit about how their work overlaps with the topic today or what you're hoping to get out of the discussion today. So Jessica, would you like to start?
So my name is Jessica Winton. I am Faisal's research assistant for OpenWaste.ai. And I'm also the creator of Waste Invaders, which is an arcade game about waste management and sorting at Concordia. So yeah, introduce yourself.
My name is Arrien Weeks. I'm one of the co-founders of the Center for Creative Reuse here at Concordia. And I've known Faisal since, since 2008, I think. And we've gone through a lot of iterations of waste at Concordia in those years. And we've talked a lot more recently about his application of AI in improving our waste systems, both locally and on a larger scale. And so I was pleased to join the panel today and throw in my own ideas into the mix. So yeah.
Wonderful. And Burcu Online, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Burcu Olgen. I'm a PhD candidate at Individualized program and also a fellow public scholar. And I'm exploring AI-augmented game-based learning experiences for sparking environmental messages, conversations in the public realm.
Wonderful. And just to check in again with our audience in person, we've got a lot of food in the back. So don't feel shy. If you want to get up like at any point and go get snacks and beverages, just go and do it. Won't be disruptive. Okay, so let's get into the questions. So first questions are going to be about levers of change and our expectations around AI. So policy is often something that we talk about as the most important tool for achieving circular economy and improving waste management, right? We often talk about system change, not bothering individuals to make changes. And I think that's important to bring out right from the onset of our conversation. Then there's sort of like other approaches like infrastructure, right? Like you can't compost if you don't have access to compost bins, or at least it's much more difficult to. You'll have to have a backyard with a composter. And then there's education as well as that's also important. So how do you all see AI and other emerging digital tools fitting into this dynamic of interventions, particularly when it comes to achieving genuine local circular economy? What role does AI have to play, and is there a limit to what we should expect it being able to accomplish?
I think in terms of policy, if we're able to use AI to strengthen the data behind what we are diverting and what we are landfilling and so on, it gives us more opportunities to change policy to make things better. Because right now, you showed those figures earlier that the numbers are probably not too accurate. So if we're able to harness the power of AI to look more concretely into the data that we do have and to build better, stronger data, then it can feed into, oh, well, actually, no, we need more reuse centers across our country or countries across the planet to be able to reduce the amount of waste going into our landfills. Then I think, why not? Like, let's harness that energy and help it to build better policy.
That's great. Jessica?
Yeah, I think as far as policy goes, it's very important to integrate all the tools that we can. And if AI is one of those tools, I'm all for it in terms of data collection, but at the same time, it can't really replace real human behavior. None of us, I hope, act like robots. But, it's very important as well to educate people, and policy is one way to do that if you make it one of the forefronts of like your initiatives. Places like France have done very well with this, and I think AI can be a great way to engage people and give them the knowledge and tools to kind of democratize that for themselves, but it shouldn't be a replacement for real life data.
Totally, that makes sense. That's interesting. I like that, the flipping of that idea. So AI can help to inform policy, right? And so we do sort of have a gap. I mean, we definitely have policies we've tried, like single-use bans and plastic bag bans, but I think what you're getting at is the data is sort of missing to show what works and what doesn't work. Okay, so about the AI bubble, I mean, I guess a lot of people are talking about the hype around AI and maybe the overemphasis on what it can actually accomplish. So does this have any bearing on the potential applications with circular economy? Like, do you see limits to what we can actually do with AI to help us? And have you ever thought about that? Burcu, do you have a... No.
Yeah, I think, there's definitely a hype around AI, and it's being thrown at every problem like it's magic, but the truth is it's a tool, and it's great at like crunching data and like spotting patterns and generating patterns, feedback generating, but it cannot replace the human judgment and creativity or context. So when we are designing for the circular economy, I think we should ask how AI can support people, not replace them. So we should be looking at it as an amplifier instead of like as a shortcut.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think that's going to be a little bit of a theme of our discussion today, I'm sure. A tool, not a replacement. Do you have something, Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. And I think it's also important to remember that AI data can only go so far. Like, it has to train on real world data to begin with, which is why it's so important to collect that in the first place. And it needs to inform, not replace.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I mean, so we're sort of hinting at one of the risks of AI, which is replacing people, definitely over-dependence on it. So let's talk a little bit about some of those unintended consequences of AI. What do you see as the key risks or unintended consequences of relying too heavily on technology like AI and data-driven solutions to address waste and resource consumption challenges?
So you kind of hinted at it in a few slides back. The assistant chatbot at the reuse center. I, in general, like the idea of it, but it does put someone or multiple people out of a job. But I think it could still be like Burcu was saying a moment ago, it's a tool, right? So could we have that and the humans that are at the center involved in helping someone problem solve, help a visitor problem solve their material problem, because the AI might have a larger data set to work with, whereas the individual, maybe they've been working there for only a year and they've only absorbed so much of what materials come into the center, but the AI assistant has like 5 years of material knowledge down. It's how it relays that to the human is different than human to human, obviously. And I think places like reuse centers and thrift stores and so on will always need that human connection, because it's that human connection that will get you just that much deeper into solving the problem or finding that thing that you had come to look for.
Totally. Any responses to that? I mean, I think that's such an on-point response. It's so important for me to see people connecting when we're at Sucker, and we don't measure that, right? It's not like we say, okay, there are this many great conversations or relationships formed, and that is something that is inherently very valuable, right? So you'd never want to replace that entirely. Okay, so
I can add one thing here, if I may. I think that neglecting things like accessibility, cultural context, and like digital literacy, we are risking systems that only we are designing these systems only a few can engage with it. I think it's crucial to design with communities and not just for them, but with them, so that they can these systems can adapt transparency and also they can be adaptable from the start.
totally, absolutely. So actually, you're sort of answering my next question, which is great. So how can we ensure that digital waste management and circularity solutions don't exacerbate social inequities, but instead serve as tools for inclusive, community-driven action?
Yeah, I can continue.
Please keep going. You already started.
I mean, yeah, community-based platforms, especially, allows us to see the collective change. Maybe we don't need even expertise. We need to talk to people and co-design these tools with them, and they take role, and then it becomes our tool, not their tool like somebody designed, but it can solve more relatable local problems.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and I guess it can feel very foreign to people. It's like, how do I participate in a process like this, like designing an AI tool that is going to help me and my community? So I don't have the answer to that question, but I think that's a really great one to put out there. I do notice that we have some questions showing up in the chat, and I guess we can save them for the end. So we acknowledge that they're coming in, just so you know. Okay. Let's talk about the ethics of collecting data about waste. So this data can be potentially sensitive. And in the wrong hands, waste data, if it's detailed enough, could be harmful potentially to people. So what problems do you foresee with waste data collection and management? Jessica?
I mean, I think when it comes to waste data, as long as all data is anonymized, it reduces the risk greatly of any problems with privacy. But at the same time, it's always going to be sensitive to some people, and as long as people can opt out, if they feel like maybe people can identify them through this information, even if it is anonymized, because maybe this person is obsessed with a certain brand of yogurt, and if all of this user's data is just these yogurt containers, they'll be like, oh, I know that person.
It's definitely you.
But yeah, I mean, I think at a certain point as well, if people are opting in and it's anonymized, it can be a real good tool for creating a circular economy.
Cool.
Which is why you still need a human behind it all, right? What's training the AI so that it doesn't, like if you're training the AI to block out certain parts of pictures because it has the potential to have, sensitive information on it, the human behind that has to be training it in such a way that it knows how to do that too, right? But there's always room for error. So how do you prepare for that too? I don't know. I'm asking more questions.
Definitely something to address. Okay, so Burcu, I don't know if you have any response. If not, yeah.
Just one quick thing, like the transparency, I think takes a really big role here. I mean, we as like people who are developing these things as researchers, like engineers and everyone, even though we know that we are not doing something wrong, or like we are not using people's data for bad things, but still people don't know. So I think it's important that we share or like we visualize these data and how it's being used, who's using, who owns the data and everything.
Right, yeah, that transparency is really important. And my next question, and I mean, feel free to answer this or not, but it's really about, is there policy, a policy component here really about how we regulate, the collecting of this data, the securitization of it, the opting in or opting out kind of options, something to think about there, right? So it's not just the transparency, but also the policies that we regulate.
I mean, there has to be, right? We're in a very, very scary time when it comes to data. We're seeing what's happening with the big tech companies and how we have actually very little control over what we post online and how it's used. So the more that in particular to what you're working on, the more that that's very transparent in terms of how it's being used. And in Burcu, you nailed this a moment ago, the better. The more that legislation behind how this kind of data is used is clear and accessible, and that people can opt in or opt out of it along the way.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. There's definitely a gap between innovation and regulation. I took a class from 2 summers ago from Concordia. They were like about regulating AI and everything. I think it's still not being regulated well. Maybe there's some improvement, but yeah, we should ask the questions Faisal just said, like, can people opt out? And also, is it energy efficient? The system is transparent. Yeah, these are very important questions to ask. Yeah.
Totally. And we didn't talk much about the environmental footprint of AI here today, but feel free if you ever have anything you want to talk about that. I don't have a specific question about this. We just assume that it's something we're going to have to measure and make sure that it's not worse than the benefit it's providing. But I think it is important to put out there. And if you have thoughts on it, please.
Leading up to today, I've been wondering a lot about localizing the data so that it's not necessarily going out to a massive cloud that then needs a massive data center that essentially sucks the life out of wherever that data center is, but that it's either, like if we think about self-checkout stations and grocery stores, that the data is centralized in that supermarket and it connects with a bigger server from time to time, but it's not constantly connected, so that its daily footprint is much smaller than always needing to be connected, which is where the footprint grows in terms of energy use, water use, because the data centers need lots of water to cool and so on. Yeah, it's a big issue, and I did a presentation recently where like 2020 data is like a data center has the equivalent footprint of the airline industry. So that's pretty massive, and with growing AI and our like thirst and need for places to store everything online, that number just keeps going up, right? So the more are there ways that we can localize the data that we're collecting so that its footprint is smaller?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, designing the system so that there's not unnecessary transmission of data, so that we're lowering the footprint. That's a great point. Okay, let's shift into talking a little bit about community engagement and gamification and design a little bit. So can anyone in our panel speak to the importance of play and enjoyment and fun in sustainability engagement, and how can these ways of engaging be incorporated into the experience of this new technology? Jessica?
Yeah, so as some of you in the crowd might know, I developed the game Waste Invaders. You might have seen it on the 7th floor of the Hall building, but today we'll also be having a demo here. So this is a game about waste management at Concordia, and it's kind of like an arcade-style game similar to the game Space Invaders, hence the name. And things like this are very important to engage and interact with people because a lot of the time when you're trying to learn a new topic, it can be very dull when you're just reading pages and digging and try to find information. But an interactive component to that through a game can be very engaging for people who don't know about the topic very much. And having it be something that really gravitates people towards it is another very important aspect that I think is overlooked because there are plenty of books on a shelf, but if you see a game there, it's like, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to go check that out instead. And it can really be a way as well to have an interactive connection with somebody else who's maybe played the game, or they see you playing it and then they want to, and it's a way to transcend language in a way as well.
Definitely. We can all play games.
And I think I think you had a slide earlier of the systems you've been wanting to test more and more on campus of having that sort of AI interaction with waste bins around campus. I think is a really interesting one to sort of gamify, but have more interaction with the bins than people currently have. Because more often than not, it's just like people will barely even look at the color of the bin that they're throwing the thing into. It's an open hole. I'm just going to throw whatever it is that I have into that hole.
Right.
Whereas if there's all of a sudden this more engaging interaction to be had, then it's like, oh, okay. And hopefully they're putting it in the right place.
Yeah, totally. Burcu?
Yeah, I also designed a game in my PhD thesis. So we in the game, like in short, we try to make sustainability problems and solutions tangible and like more related, because this can be very these things like sustainability and everything can be very abstract for certain people, but it's about life and it's about the city and everything. So we tried to, with this board game and the digital version, we tried to make the problems related to the site, to the community, and then make people solve these problems by selecting or like by playing action cards. So I think play is very underrated in this space because it can allow people to like test out ideas without the fear to fail. And I think that if there's joy in the action, it makes it more memorable, and makes the learning fun, and maybe it could even spark inspiration to apply some of these things, some of the sustainable behavior in their daily lives. Yeah, I think play can create an emotional connection between the subject and the player.
Yeah, that's an amazing idea that we can de-escalate fear, right? Like it can be intimidating to participate in sustainability, not knowing the right thing to do, right? Like, are people observing you, you know? And I think games are just, one way of doing that. That's a great insight. Okay, Arrien, please.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, I mean, we want kids to have less screen time, but it could also be really interesting if they're in screens and it's just really hard to disconnect them from it. Why not add that to the waste sorting component to it? So them if they're using the screen anyways, why not have them really playing with the waste around the house and using that device to help them properly sort it or understand it better. Maybe it's the future model of like, oh, this thing is actually reusable. Let's keep it in the house for some play later on. You know, it becomes part of a different game. So yeah, I don't like the idea of screen time for kids, but why not embrace it a little bit more in that way?
Totally. Yeah, I think that's a super interesting idea. I mean, kids are going to be playing games anyway, so you might as well get them involved. Okay.
Can I add one small thing
Please.
there? I think that's a great point. And also, we are social creatures. Like we love to collaborate, like contribute to something bigger than us, right? So it's really like the games, I think, make this process more fun and like engaging for people so that we can collect things, gamification, we can get rewards doing things, and if we can also see that how our behavior is impacting the community and the general well-being of the society and environment. And I think it would encourage us to do more and to also ask more from our governments and other people.
I think Rissa Quebec is missing the mark right now. If they could attach an app or like expand the Sava'u. So Sava'u is a website and an app that Rissa Quebec has developed. But we're in a weird time with recycling in the province where essentially you can put anything in your recycling bin at this point. I don't think it's a great idea, but because it can lead to a much larger mess. But if people could use an app that's helping to like understand the waste around the house a bit better, then we might end up with better recycling streams because people are understanding the stuff they're actually putting in their recycling bins better rather than just, and it's like a giant form of wish cycling at this point, but that's another topic.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that too. And if any of the panelists want to weigh in on this direction, I mean, if anybody feels like they need more info. Jessica, you have something to say
Yeah, I
about
mean,
this.
I was just going to say, because I'll be doing my master's research on this specifically in terms of like contamination and stuff. And
Yeah.
a lot of people never really think about what they put in the recycling bin or trash until it's something they actually care about and are sad to lose. But interacting with things such as games and stuff can really get your mind thinking about what it means every time you put something into the trash rather than just what you're attached to. Because realistically, it's not going away, it's just going somewhere else.
Yeah, totally. I want to touch on something Burcu was getting at, which is the social nature of humans. And I'm going to ask, is there a way that we can think of the relationship between community and AI in a different way? Like, can AI actually drive building of community for circular economy, right? Like, is there a way that, instead of sort of replacing people and replacing connections, can it actually like get us to connect more in a way? Because that's really what we need fundamentally. I think there's a lot at stake of like us becoming more individualized and siloed. And AI is just like another tool that's maybe making us less dependent on each other, right? And that's very dangerous in a lot of ways, even fundamentally for democracy, but just in terms of resilience as well. So any thoughts about that? Is there a role it can play to like help us in that way rather than just fracture us?
I think I can. You're Jessica. Are you going?
Go ahead.
I think participatory design takes a big role here. Like because if you don't design with people, the tools won't work for them. Because even though, let's say, I'm as a designer, I'm a part of the community as well, but still I cannot guess people's needs, like not everyone. So like participatory design allows bringing in like diverse people as focus groups and like co-design systems and tools with them so that they can relate better with the tool, and also it would be like for them to use. So also relatability is very important. Like for example, in the game we designed, we make it about Montreal so that people relate better in the site specificity is very important, so that they can co-collaborate with this like design process and also relate with the local issues and solutions, I think that would bring the engagement better, like on the table with AI and other technologies. So.
Oh, that makes sense. Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, you have to involve people in designing the solutions because otherwise the people who are trying to use the solutions won't understand how to do it, and it'll just be a big problem. That's why you don't really get engineers to design the UI and interface of things a lot of the time because, it can be very rigid. But yeah, I mean, as far as community goes, I first came to Concordia during the COVID pandemic. So for me, when I joined the Sustainability Ambassadors program, it was huge for me because I felt like I had found some people who I would have never otherwise met, who got me more engaged, and I learned a lot. So not having those community aspects, it can really isolate people and ultimately not improve the situation at all.
Totally. Okay. I have a few more questions, but it is 1:10. And I'm wondering how people are feeling. Do you want to keep going, or do you want to shift to question and answers from the chat or from the group here? Because we can kind of shift gears a little bit. We've been chatting for a while. We can go forever. So should we start with questions online, since there already are some, and then we'll kind of mix and match, or with in person?
If there's a question here in the space, we could start there.
Okay, yeah,
And I'll read out some from the chat
Good,
also.
sounds good.
But anyone here? Have any? Okay. Oh, there's one.
Hello. Thanks for this. I didn't realize what I was coming to. I just heard some friends were on a panel and there was focaccia. But this has been amazing. The thing that is kind of like blinking in my head is the precautionary principle. How can we learn from our historical blunders when it comes to fossil fuels and plastic production and all that kind of stuff, where we could have applied principles of precaution and pumped the brakes and said, you know what, we don't know how this is going to impact society, the economy, the environment, so let's think about this more critically. There's a lot of critical thinking, a lot of critical questions that were asked today about impact on the environment, impact on our community. And I don't know if I'm sold on the use case of AI as kind of like a blanket. We've been trying to crack this nut of engagement around waste for many years. I was also there many years ago. But I'm wondering, those moments of like, could we apply AI here, or could we add another human? Could we pay another salary? Could we increase connection between human beings instead of relying on AI? But then, the standalone garbage can in the middle of nowhere that can actually help someone learn how to sort their waste is incredibly valuable. So I think like community consultations and developing policy and the use is really important, and not just like, okay, AI is here, let's see what it can do. Because then we get caught in those loops of like, oh, we're using it already, so why would we get rid of it? So that there's no question in there. It's just the ramblings of drinking too much coffee and an interesting topic. So thank you. And that's what I have to say.
Thanks, Mark. I think what it brings up for me was what Burcu was talking about earlier was AI as a tool that we can use for waste. And I would say as an extension to the humans that we have involved in the waste process, from the janitorial staff to people like Faisal and others working on waste at higher levels in the institution, that it's an extension, it's an add-on, it's not a replacement of a human being. Because I think it can actually improve our jobs greatly in the waste sphere here and in the Greater Montreal and elsewhere, because it can filter through the data much more quickly than any human can. And I think that's where we've maybe lagged as humans in the past, is like we haven't been able to understand quickly enough where we have like really problem areas that we need to tackle first. Compost is working, but oh man, our hazardous waste, we really need to work on that because it's not doing well. Like we really need to tackle that better. And I think Faisal's been talking for the last year or so about having AI helping to understand when like our big dumpsters or our compactors are ready to be picked up, so that we're having the like frequency of waste pickup and even understanding of what's in those compactors without a human having to interact with it. So it's increasing safety for humans because there's a different element there that is taking them, sort of backing them off of a potentially hazardous situation for them in their job. So I think it has a lot of potential as an extension, as an add-on, but again, not as a replacement for a position or positions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Mark, also for being here, but also just sharing your thoughts. And I want to tell the audience, if you don't have a question, it's totally fine. Like we want to hear your thoughts too. So it's a question and answer and sharing thought session. Yeah, I think it's really important to talk about like what AI can't do, I guess, and like really emphasizing that as we go. Like, so if it's a tool that solves a problem, well, what can't it do? And always being very vocal about that, so that is front and center, and we can really validate why we need people to do things, right? And why we need it as a tool. So I mean, we are always going through layers of adding technology to solving or helping solve these sustainability problems, and it's just another tool at the end of the day, right? Okay,
There's a couple questions online I can take. There's one a little bit earlier, but I'll read them out, and feel free to re-add them into the chat if you want to rephrase them after some of the things that have happened since. As well, someone is also asking about OpenAI, and I'll put the link that's from the QR code into the chat in a second. Okay, so one of the questions is there a way in which AI, its utility, can be promoted more in contrast to currently generative AI being the only thing that we maybe hear about, sadly, says Iqbal.
Yeah, can it be promoted more? Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, AI doesn't have to just be this one thing, like generative AI. I think as long as we shift the focus to what it can be, like with algorithms for maybe recommendations for your YouTube or whatever, it takes many forms. And having it be a tool as like almost like a database that you can speak to in a way, in a more plain language, I think is very helpful. Because a lot of the time when it comes to access to information for waste, it can be very undefined. And an AI might be able to help you define it and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of the form that it takes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think there's a long way to go to kind of like educate people about AI and its potential, but it's always going to be a battle, I think, between the headlines and between people's sort of literacy. I think that's with every single topic, but it's a very good question. There is a lot of potential there. Arrien?
Well, and I think more conversations like this, I think more conversations from one of your earlier slides that talks about the different types.
Yeah.
Because we have been, as this person just mentioned online, we've been talking about sort of one specific kind.
Yeah.
But to have more conversations about the larger world of AI, let's call it, is important going forward. And to continue to talk about the dangers and the pluses and minuses of it and how it can help as a whole, and to continue to talk about legislation as well.
Yeah, it's a super interesting question. I mean, it's just about community literacy, right? Like, and even with sustainability, it's a challenge, right? To talk about informing communities about sustainability issues, a very complex topic, something that I believe people should understand to a certain degree to be able to participate in decision making around their futures. And I guess the same should be said for AI. I'm sure there are initiatives out there, and I guess I should probably connect more with them, especially for my initiative. So thanks for that question, Iqbal.
We had a question here.
Thank you so much for this talk and all these interventions. I had a question regarding kind of the framework that you were taking all these projects into account. Right now, we've been thinking about the concept of, like waste, what happens after it's been wasted.
Yeah.
But in your, I assume, in your discussions, like leading up to this project, have you also taken into account what if we did not have to waste in the first place? Like I'm thinking about the app that allows you to like the concept where you look for an item and it tells you where it is close by. Have you considered something like something that does the entire inventory of what's already in your house so that you don't need to buy in the first place?
Right.
Or such things like that.
Right. That's a great point. I mean, during COVID, we joked about shopping at home as like your first step, right? Like you go and look in your basement or your storage room and, wow, I have a whole bunch of stuff. I'm so glad I didn't go out and buy it. It's because there was pressure like not to go out at first. And, online delivery, we weren't quite doing it just yet. So there's so much potential. You're totally right. And if we can inventory quickly with AI, I mean, definitely we should be applying it at home. I think people would be helped by that.
I've been in lots of corners of this university, storage units, closets. I've seen all kinds of materials. I think if there was a way to quickly understand what was in these spaces and not have to overwhelm an individual or a few individuals with having to inventory that space, we would probably realize that we have way more than we would ever need at Concordia because it already exists. Like office supplies or technology or, and then we could lower our budgets and we would have more to spend on other things if we needed to. So I think there's a lot of potential to know what we already have if we can harness AI to do that for us as well. But I think in an inventory of, or maybe it can help us to make better purchases in the future. If it's able to look at what we already have, but also what we have historically been purchasing. And based on maybe the information around a particular company, it's like, well, this company just dropped their whole diversity, equity, and inclusion portfolio, so probably don't purchase from them anymore. And this one has actually just hired a whole team for EDI at their company, so let's purchase from them. They're doing great things. So I think there's potential there too to help us with future purchasing and using the tool again.
It's a really good one. I think you just came up with a great project. Ethical procurement through AI. For sure, it's a complex topic. I always imagine that process of inventorying like my basement, and then I think about like, would it really be able to do that because things are hidden away within things, and so I think there'd have to be sort of a process, and it wouldn't be able to do the whole thing for you, but maybe it could help you and just make it easier, right? Like if it just facilitated that barrier, because there's nothing more like annoying than just like going into a room full of stuff and trying to sort it. Like, I don't know, I just find that to be one of the most difficult physical things to do, like the stuff I never dealt with before, now dealing with it, Anyway, question in the audience over there. We've got two hands raised in the back, so I don't know who wants to go first. Just choose amongst yourselves.
Hi, thanks for this talk. It's really interesting, and I think it's an important, I mean, I'm here, so I think it's an important topic to explore. What I'm wondering though, and I find that with all emerging technologies, and AI is the latest one, we often think, well, we have this great potential, we should throw it at the problem, but we need to really identify what the problem is. And I'm hearing a lot of using AI to help encourage people to sort waste properly, but one of the problems with sorting waste properly is not having a place to put the waste in the first place. And so, like if compost is working really well, but there aren't compost bins everywhere there's food service on campus, for example. And so how much of the problem is not so much, because I know where to put compost, but if there's no compost bin to put it in, I can't do that. And so having these smart bins is great, but they require a lot of electricity. There's a lot of ramp up costs to get them in place. We have a smart garbage bin in my park beside my neighborhood, and it's broken half the time. And so it's not even working, and it's not usable, and the trash accumulates around it. And so, like, I think it's great to think about how do we gamify education on sorting waste, but Should we be using the AI to understand what the problem really is in the first place before applying it to the solution? Like, should we be using it for tracking? Like, I really like the idea of like sorting and doing waste audits is really complex, dirty, and it's that low-hanging fruit that we say that robotics and AI is really good at. Shouldn't we be understanding what are the patterns of behavior and then put the infrastructure in place and then decide if we need to smartify it and use a layer of AI to gamify it, or is just having the proper bins sufficient? And so I think thinking about the problem at a larger scale, the gamified applications seem really cool, and I'm excited to check them out, and I think that's really neat. And yes, education is really important. But what is the real problem we're trying to address? Because there is an important environmental cost to all of these technological innovations, not just their use in energy and water when they're running, but the infrastructure that's required to run it as well. How much are we contributing to the problem by creating these tech solutions when we can think of a low-tech solution maybe to the problem? Anyway, that's a lot of stuff in there, but my 2 cents into the conversation.
Great.
I mean, the short answer is yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I'm just going to say this out loud. I think we need more reuse centers across the planet. Sometimes people ask me, well, isn't it just sort of like a different version of a thrift store? And yes, to a certain extent, but it's an and. It's not a. It's an and. Yeah, it's an and.
Yeah.
It's part of a bigger solution. If we had places where we could bring things that were no longer of use to us, not trash, but no longer use to us, then we would reduce the number of times that your smart bin is broken on the corner because it's not being used, so it's actually, is working longer because it's not being over or bombarded with stuff. Because, and the research already shows, we have everything we already need. It's just a matter of looking at it differently. We have all the materials, we've mined all the materials we ever need. We keep mining, but we have all the materials we could ever need because there's actually more out of the ground that humans have transformed than there's left in the ground, which is a weird concept to think about, but everything's already here, and we just need to rethink it. So AI is a tool, probably in a different context, but we need to think better about the systems that we've tried to create. The recycling and the trash and the compost systems are not ideal. They don't always work. We see that every single day. I wonder half the time if the recycling bin that gets picked up is actually going to a recycling center, or is it just going to a landfill? We have a lot of work to do. And I think getting back to that sense of community is like, we need to continue to come together as community to make these systems better from a community standpoint. We can't always be relying on our municipalities to figure it out, because more often than not, it's not working. So if we can come together as community and help to build a stronger waste system, I think all the better.
I can add something to this, just a little. This was my nightmare question throughout my PhD. I mean, yeah, we don't want to be the problem that we are trying to solve, right? So, but I stood myself thinking of all the technology, like improvement of the technology happened throughout the history, impacted the environment in a way. I'm not trying to justify AI is like doing it a lot worse than the others. But I thought that I put this logic like this is inevitable. We are not going to stop AI to be improved, developed. Like the people are going to work on this unless we bring some like limits to it, like in a governmental level. But I don't think so. I think the country is seeing AI as the next thing, So this is gonna happen. So what I thought is like, so it is inevitable. So how we can use this to for a greater good, for something for environment at least. Because if I'm not gonna use it to raise awareness or teach people how to sort waste or something for the environment, they're gonna use it to ask easy questions or something. It's been used anyway. It's been used for a lot of silly things that we've seen, right? So why not use it to this for this? And I think by generating new ideas, like creative ideas in the research or in the field, we get to close this gap in the future, so that maybe we can find ways that AI is more helpful um, than destroying the environment. I think the balance is important.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's how I landed on this topic, right? Burcu was like, okay, it's getting used. I'm gonna get involved and like try to steer this application in a better direction. But to your point, I mean, you're 100% right. I will not argue with you on anything you said. AI is not going to fix the fact that you don't have a compost bin where you can throw your organic waste away. If you don't have the right distribution of bins, that's a very fundamental issue, that you can add a smart bin to that, setup, and it's not going to fix that problem. If people don't understand how to use the bins, I mean, maybe it can help where that bin is, that smart bin, but it's not going to help them where the smart bin isn't. So, the point is to not, again, to fix those fundamental problems. Actually, I think what we need to do, like I was saying before, is use this moment to articulate what it can't do, right? And always be very clear about that. But, also what Burcu is saying, this is also getting used in this not so great way. We are a research institution, we are a community that is passionate. Let's also guide that conversation on what it can do in the right way. So we're sort of responsible in all of these ways, right? I think that's really important. Okay, more questions? Mana, you had one.
So I had a comment and I had a question, or slightly challenged, but it kind of spans off of what you said. So it's my concern is the target audience in the community of, because I like the idea of the AI is educating what to compost and what to compost. Because even like I'm on GM11 and I'm like the compost police, or like I get mad when people put the wrong thing in the wrong bin. And Faisal,
Yeah.
But I feel like apps and games or whatever, it's maybe for people who are already aware of what to put compost and what not to compost and how waste, like, can it be used for like the broader community as an overall, I'm just throwing this out there, as an overall like educational tool, but maybe more passive, like not for the person who's got the app or got the game or the kids who love the tablet and are playing these. So that's just the idea of like, how do we broaden it to overall members of the community who might not have the fine-tuned education of like different types of waste and compost and all that. So that was just a question or a challenge or devil's advocate. And then my comment that I wrote, and I thought it was really great, Arrien, because I'm working on a project that's slightly more data-driven than what I usually do. And when you said the human addresses the sensitive information and maintains the privacy and ethics and that transparency. And I think that's really what's important. When we talk about AI, we cannot remove the human component and the human experience away from it. And that's been my hesitation about AI. It's been a few years now. I've gone to some conferences for education in AI. And I like the fact that we always have to retain the importance of the human overseer on this potential technology that will run away one day and we will be like, what happened? So thank you again for the talk.
Well, thank you. So I think that's a good place to wrap up, unless there are more burning questions. We have like some demos ready for you now. And actually, to your point too about using, question? Rainer? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thanks. One thought, one question. I try to keep it like you. The thought on AI and trustful AI. And this is a really huge topic at the moment. And I think one potential solution or what we need to do is to see actually how open source is defined, because Meta is doing a really, really super great job in their communications to say, hey, Llama is open source, but it's not. And the challenge in building trustful AI, it's not only the code we write, it's also the data and how to make it accessible. And this goes back, I think, to your second slide, where you showed this hub and what kind of data you used, and actually what kind of model you are just running. So this is my thought. And now the question I have. I'm switching the topic because the title now it's about circular economy. And I did not hear any word about economy. About circular AI, there was much talks here or ideas. And I'm questioning. I have no idea about the Canadian Montreal waste management system. But if we have this super smart recycling stations and bins, who is paying for this? I mean, is this big companies or who are working in this business? Are they interested to have it? I mean, who is giving them back something to the community?
Yeah.
We are doing their job.
Yeah.
So this is my question. How do you see this?
Perfect question. Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the economy goes, obviously waste is very intertwined with our economy in the sense that we don't really think of how we can better utilize waste to actually benefit us. A lot of the time we're just, oh, we'll just mine more materials, it's cheaper, it's fine, whatever. But we're not thinking about the long-term impacts of what it really means to withdraw all these materials and use plastic in basically everything. And as far as the city goes, like it's kind of complicated in the sense that, at least for Montreal, there's a few different tiers of like municipalities and everything. But ultimately, if we can create a free and easy solution that they're able to adapt with AI or with more human connections and reuse centers, I think that would be amazing. But it can be very difficult to get them on board without having the data firsthand, because unfortunately, in some cases and unfortunately in others, they're very data-driven in terms of their policy making. Like they would rather take 10 years to do something once they actually have the data instead of, just let's try this and see if it works. And even if it's worked in somewhere else, they're like, oh, well, maybe it won't work for us. I don't know. And it's just, it's complicated. But economically, it makes sense to try to focus on how we can better reuse waste, and the tools that enable us to get there, I think, are very important.
If any of the other panelists have responses to the question, I can give a quick answer. I mean, one of the questions that I had put up when we were looking through the different application, case examples, was like, what organizational structure can support this? And I think that's a really important question, and we didn't get to it really. And you're getting to that point, which is, how are we going to benefit from this, or who is going to benefit from this, right? And I tried to illustrate it a little bit in a soft way through the Reuse Center, the Concordia University Center of Creative Reuse, but I think it bears more explicit discussion, right? Like, who funds that project, right? Where does that money come from to run the project, have the space, pay the people to do the work? We know, that's actually, in a way, government funding, right? It's a collective funding where the institution had a sustainability priority and then decided to allocate some resources to accomplish this goal. And it was a very novel idea, and it ended up working very well because we've demonstrated it saves the community money. So the accounting is kind of tricky, right? Because it's not saving necessarily Concordia University $500,000 over 8 years. That's saving everyone collectively. So if you draw sort of the map of the investment and then who benefits, well, it does come back to the community in a way. That's just one example of how an investment can be done collectively towards this benefit. And maybe we need to be thinking about that collective investment in different formats, right? It's not really a business, I don't think. It's not necessarily going to make somebody, a company, a lot of money. This idea of, recirculating these materials, I think it's tricky. But that's just from where I'm sitting. I think it's a collective problem, and I think it's a collective solution and a collective organization that's going to do the best job at addressing this issue with all of our concerns embedded into it, right? Of like transparency, open data, open source software, et cetera, et cetera.
I think we have to think about it from a municipal level. If we look across the country and look at how much municipalities are spending on our waste management systems and how much we actually benefit at the end of the day, but also at what capacity our landfills are at. We're probably over capacity at this point, probably quite a bit more than we think. So how do we actually defund parts of our waste system and move that funding into places like, more robust thrift stores or reuse centers? Because a lot of what we're throwing away, and Faisal showed some numbers earlier, is still very valuable, whether monetarily or just as a material. It's still very valuable to our communities. So if we can put it in a place that is accessible to our wider community, then we've just increased our economy. I'm doing it in quotes because at the center that we have here at Concordia, we're not charging money for the materials because it would have been waste anyways. And I think it sounds a little ridiculous to think about that at a municipal scale too, but I wouldn't charge at a municipal scale either, because it de-incentivizes people to come and get the materials. Once you start charging for materials, you exclude a good portion of the population. The biggest users of the center here at Concordia are students. And often, we generalize that students don't have a lot of money, and it's often true, but they're paying for tuition and they have a lot of other things going on. They might be paying for rent for an apartment that is way overpriced. And if there's a place that they can get materials that can improve their lives on campus, improve their academics on campus, then why not have that at a larger scale and change our economy of one from like a monetary economy to a gift economy where we have so much. Why not make everybody that much happier?
Totally. Any other thoughts from the panelists? Okay. Do we have time for another question, or do we need to wrap up? We can take the last question.
I was the guy that was. Thank you so much. I was the person that was online.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Mark Moranci.
Glad
So
you
I was
made
just
it.
like rushing before you guys ended to ask a question. One of you guys mentioned something that's very important, is that a lot of times when you mix sustainability and profitability, it seems like it's a very low outcome. If we looked at it from the other perspective, meaning if there was a way to make it highly profitable, do you think that like the community effect, the network effect, or just the interests of the people around us, do you feel like that would interest them more?
I think it would be interesting to industry, but it wouldn't be that interesting to the rest of the population, I think we're seeing some really interesting and scary things happening right now economically. And the more that we can change our economies to be one of resource abundance and not scarcity and closing off whole economies to peoples, the better. Okay. We have to think about massive alternatives at this point, because there's going to be a type of scarcity in the coming months, in the coming years, that we haven't seen in a very long time. And so the more that we can think in terms of alternative economies, the better we're all going to be off. So.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I really enjoyed the discussion personally. I'm getting really hungry, so I'd like us to wrap up. But I also want us to look at some of the demos that we had planned. Jessica is going to show us Waste Invaders, and I'm going to do a simulation of something called an agent-based model. It's a very simple model that I'm going to show you, and actually addresses your question about maybe using this technology to figure out what investments we need before we need AI. So it's about simulating different waste bin deployments versus different education, different policy instruments, and how does that impact our goals. So again, really, really appreciated the questions. They were awesome. You've been amazing guests, and the panelists, amazing discussions. Thank you so much, everybody. But stick around if you want to see, and even online, these demos. And for those of us in the space, please continue to eat the food as well. And if you want to join us, the QR code is for applying for volunteer positions, because this is a participative project. So again, thank you very much.
And leave some food for us, please.
Okay, so yeah, so I guess I'm going to join the Zoom. I didn't join the Zoom yet. Okay, yeah, you can go get your food.
Also, just a note for you joining us on Zoom, thanks for all your questions and comments. Those were really great. We're going to collect those and we'll get those to Faisal and the panelists afterwards. But thank you for that.
Hey, thanks for coming. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Okay. So I'm going to be demoing Waste Invaders. There's one set up here as well behind the projector. But essentially, it is a game for managing and sorting your waste. Oops. There we go. So we'll start with the tutorial just so I can explain and talk as it goes. First, we'll enter a name. I'll just put Jessica. Okay. So Waste Invaders is an educational arcade game, again, for waste management, inspired by Space Invaders. So we'll start with a tutorial, and as I'll read out the prompts. So there are 2 stages to this game, and we'll first go over stage 1, which is the main methods of waste disposal at Concordia. So you can see the buttons appear up on the side. We have composting, mixed recycling, paper recycling, and landfill here on the right. They're all associated with the colored buttons at our demo or the 1 to 8 keys.
Yes. Okay, amazing. Sounds good.
So cleaning comes into effect in the second stage, and we'll get onto that pretty soon. But it can include anything from washing out a container or disassembling different parts. Like let's say on a water bottle, the cap and the bottle are not actually the same material, so they need to be separated to be sorted properly. And recycling at Concordia is in 2 main categories. It's mixed and paper recycling. So paper is obviously paper, cardboard, things like that. And mixed recycling is metal, glass, plastic. And it's very important to have them separated because paper can be contaminated very easily. So if you put a cup of coffee in the paper recycling by accident, it can contaminate everything in there and then nothing gets recycled. So as I was just saying, most of what we recycle is only recyclable in certain conditions. And in Canada, on average, only around 9% actually gets recycled once you put it into the bin. To put it in perspective, it's pretty bad. So the main goal should obviously be to avoiding the landfill as well as just in general. So we'll have a few objects here on the screen. You can see them. Up at the top as well, there are the names. We have, for example, under this object here, we have the plastic cling wrap, and next we'll have like a vinyl record or a water jug. So it's very easy to understand for anybody if you're having difficulty like recognizing what it is from the actual image. And the first thing to understand as well is the different types of plastics. So here in Quebec, we only have 1 through 7, although there are more numbers. But these refer to the plastic resin codes. So specifically at Concordia, the rules have changed since I wrote the tutorial, so I have to update it. But at Concordia, plastic type 6 polystyrene is not recyclable. However, in Quebec, it now is accepted to put into recycling. So these are what these codes look like in the game. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then the little trash container, just so you know what trash looks like. And yeah, not all plastic objects are made the same. And I just said that. So some objects, maybe like toys and stuff, are made out of type 6 plastic, but you'll often have a difficult time finding this information unless it's embossed or actually on the item. We can start into the game. So stage 1 is originally just about the plastic resin codes. So for example, if I try to shoot plastic type 6, which at Concordia is not accepted into recycling, you have to use the trash button to destroy it. All the other types are currently accepted that are here. So yeah, you just shoot them with mixed recycling, the orange button. And it'll become more complicated as time goes on. I can't hold the mic and play at the same time, but I will try my best. And so as the game progresses, you'll have more objects that are replacing the plastic resin codes. So you'll have the actual objects such as a garbage bag. Now you might think that because a garbage bag is type 4 plastic, it's accepted. That's not necessarily true. Stretchy plastics can be very difficult to recycle, and specifically when it comes to garbage bags, they're quote unquote designed to go into the trash. So you would hit the trash button for that. And then other objects such as a broken light bulb, while they might be made of plastic, glass, or metal, which are mixed, if you try that, it goes into the landfill because broken glass and stuff is actually dangerous to put in for the workers who have to sort the trash. Same goes for styrofoam cups. Styrofoam is another name for polystyrene, so this also goes into the trash. Wet paper, however, while it might not be able to go into paper recycling, you can compost it. So not everything that is soiled necessarily from being recycled has to go into the trash, which is one thing that I would really like to emphasize for everybody, as we're too quick to just throw things away. And then certain things like waxed cardboard can also be composted, as far as I'm aware, unless the rules have changed. But yeah, and then same goes for things like ramen cups, depending on what they're made of, they can go in the trash. And yeah, they can't most of the time be recycled because they're made of type 6 plastic. Come on, here we go. And certain objects, before you put them into recycling, you should also make sure that they're clean, so that way they don't contaminate things, such as a cooking oil bottle or maybe laundry detergent bottle as well. And so this stage is obviously just the objects themselves, and after this stage, you'll see how it becomes more complicated, because recycling and things might seem easy on the surface, but in reality, once you try to internalize all of the factors and initiatives at play, it can become very complicated very quickly. Certain objects in the game as well, I should have commented this before I destroyed it. There is a waxed cereal bag. So if you buy like a box of Cheerios or something, it comes in a plastic bag. That bag is not recyclable because it's coated with wax on the inside to keep it fresh. And these things might not be very obvious to you because they're not communicated. The box might say recyclable, but again, it's all about the separate components that make up an item, not just the end product itself. And then we'll see something similar as well when it comes to like blister packaging. So if you buy medication that you have to pop out, it's made of plastic and metal. These things are very, very, very difficult to separate. So these would go in the trash. And so the tutorial for stage 2 is more or less the same, but it just goes into more detail for things around Concordia specifically. And now you can see all of the separate buttons for stage 2. It doubles the amount of requirements to 8 buttons. The additional ones are electronic recycling, campus initiatives, a cleaning button, and a donation button. Campus initiatives have been cut back severely recently, but I would like to think they'll come back in the future. Currently, the game just takes into account Sucker as well as Retech. And I'll get into that later. So this introduces a lot more objects. So we have like PVC pipes, we have aluminum pans, there's even like let's say you need to recycle your credit card. How do you do that? So something like your credit card actually goes into electronic recycling as long as you cut it up properly because there's the chip in there. So it can't necessarily go into the regular recycling. And things like beer bottles as well. I mean, we have the deposits, but because it's glass, you should make sure it's clean beforehand and then do mixed recycling. So the game also, you'll notice, has a score in the top left here based on how sustainable you're doing it. Let's say you're making sure everything's clean and then you're putting it into the right initiative. Let's say you clean it and then you donate it to soccer. That'll be giving you more points than just throwing it right into recycling, because it allows it to have a second life instead of just being maybe recycled. Because realistically, as we learned in the tutorial, only 9% of material around Canada is recycled. And yeah, so that's the game. I'll just die a bunch so I can show you the menus, because I feel like this has been a little long. Yeah, so once you have, or you're over 3 lives, we'll rate it 5 stars because wow, what an amazing game. And one of the main things that this update includes is the wiki for the objects within the game. So if you wanted to look at all the objects, you can go through and check exactly what is what, how it gets recycled, things like that. And yeah, it's categorized by the color of the buttons. So let's say green is, I want to say paper recycling. So paper recycling, yeah, it's in brackets. So it makes it very clear to the user how you can learn about this, even outside of playing the game. And yeah, for campus initiatives, these need to be updated, but they included a few old ones like the Co-op Bookstore and CP3. Here's hoping they'll come back one day. And yeah, the leaderboard, you know, it is a game after all, so join the fun and try to get a high score. Embed yourself in history. And that'll be it.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm going to load up another little demo for us. So this is another area of my research. It's adjacent to AI. It's a computational modeling approach, which is like a simulation using a computer system of a complex system. It's called agent-based modeling, and this area of research has been applied traditionally to like systems that exhibit complex behavior. So when you think of like biological organisms working in groups and how they behave. You have a group of a collective made up of individuals that each have their set of instructions, and what ends up happening is they follow these rules, but what you observe can be much more complicated than these individual rules on their own because of the way they interact with each other, as well as the environment they're in. So a really classic example of agent-based modeling being used is to study ants and their behavior, for example. Ants, have pheromone trails that they use. They drop around as they're foraging for food, and then they might, leave this trail to help other ants follow suit. The pheromones might, stick around for a certain amount of time, which leads to these trails of ants following each other and then being able to successfully or not successfully collect food. And so you can actually visualize what happens when you tweak these basic rules that you give to the individual ants, whether their pheromones are very strong or whether they disappear quickly, how quickly they move, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you think of this principle being applied there, if you think of waste management and circular economy and the way we behave as individuals, that's something else we can apply agent-based modeling to. We each are driven by a bunch of psychological rules, and these rules have been studied for quite a long time, actually since the 70s. There are lots of studies that have been conducted on people and their sustainability behaviors, and particularly recycling, just because it's been sort of the topic for a long time. So why do we recycle? What motivates us? And then there have been theories devised and equations come up with to try and actually model how we behave as individuals. And we conduct surveys to test these ideas and see whether they're true. And surveys, as we know, they're okay. People can lie on surveys, but it does give us somewhat of an insight into how people tick and what makes them want to recycle or not, or how much they know about recycling or not, and what they need to be able to recycle, whether they believe that recycling works and whether that influences their participation in recycling. So researchers have used this approach, agent-based modeling, to take those kinds of understandings and try and simulate them in this complex world, right? Where people are interacting with waste bins and neighbors and observing their neighbors and their behavior. And maybe there's policies sort of guiding their behavior, like encouraging them to recycle for rewards or penalties that might be applied if they do it wrong. And the idea is to see like what kind of different permutation of these approaches or these interventions yields the best results, right? So what will make people on the whole in this complex system recycle more? So I'm going to show you an example of an agent-based model that was created for a town in China, Guangzhou in China, where there's 3 different communities you can see here represented on these grids. This is a grid level agent-based modeling. These things can be simulated in different environments. They can be even 3D, or they can be totally abstract where you don't even see any of it. You just see the results. But this one is kind of nice because you can visualize it from an overhead view. This represents households on this grid. And in the top left, it's this university community, part of the neighborhood, and the rest is more like municipal households. And you can see there's more green dots in the top left, so that means they're recycling households. So this is a very simplified model where either you recycle as a household or you don't. And then there's 2 different versions of recycling. You either recycle with a nearby container that you drop off your recycling out, or you have an informal collector come and collect your recycling. And this is a system that's pretty prevalent in China, and there's a lot of efforts at the national level to move away from this informal system because of sort of the risks, the hazards of informal recycling, not necessarily getting the best environmental results, and it's also just kind of more challenging to scale up. Anyway, so if I press go on this simulation, you'll see what happens. Basically, the parameters we have to control here use a theory of behavior called theory of planned behavior, where people are, motivated to do something based on their intentions and their attitudes and social norms. So like what they observe other people doing. And these sliders on the left determine, how important these different parameters are in this simulation. So we can increase the weight of their environmental attitudes. So how important is it to their behavior that they are passionate or like concerned about the environment, or the weight of the social norm. So how much are they paying attention to their neighbors, or the weight of perceived behavioral control, which means how much do they believe that recycling is in their control, as in when they put the thing in the recycling, will it actually get recycled, and can they do a good job of it? So anyway, I'm just gonna press go. I'm gonna do like a go once so you can see how like green dots start to appear as people get influenced by each other and recycling behavior spreads. And then on the right, there are these charts that show the total waste and the participation rate. And so if I press go, it will see like the simulation go. And this is a very abstract simulation where time is just measured in ticks, which I guess are sort of, weeks or something. And then you can see, there's a spread of this recycling behavior, but there's a limit to how far it spreads. Eventually, sort of it plateaus and it reaches the limit of what can happen, what can spread. So I think this is a really interesting tool to consider using more and more. And one of the questions in the audience was like, what are the interventions we should be considering before we think of AI as a solution? And we really need to start actually trying as a society to model interventions, like how we spend our investments. Are we spending on just like educational campaigns, or is it a mix of policy and education? And we actually need to measure and understand the people in the different communities that we're applying these interventions to see if these interventions are going to work. And of course, this is not a predictive tool, but it is an informing tool. It gives us an idea, especially if we do what we call validating of the model, and that's a very important step. So ideally, if you're creating this kind of model, you're testing it out in a sort of controlled setting where you're measuring the parameters before, and then you're doing the model, and then you're seeing whether that model and a test of those interventions in the real world actually result in what your model said was going to happen. And then once you have that, you know that you have a somewhat of an accurate model that you could use to extrapolate results in other places. So these kinds of decision-making tools are very important. And this one here maybe is a little hard to kind of wrap our heads around because it's just red dots and green dots and random households in a town in China. But imagine doing this, in a community that you're in, right? Like your municipality, right? Think about how people understand the importance of recycling and what influences them, and what would you want to model, right? So where do they get their info from? Is it pamphlets in the mail that they receive, so you can maybe model education campaigns that are received that way? Do they have relationships with their neighbors? So this model maybe oversimplifies the way we influence each other. It's just households next to each other. We all know that we don't all know our neighbors, but we do have a certain number of social connections that might influence us, right? And some more strongly than others. So we can actually check into those things. We can ask people, about their connections, their relationships, and we can actually try to model how these influences might spread through a community, right? And then the same thing is just like having access to a bin is a factor you could model. And then this layer on top that we're talking about, right? Eventually, we want to know a smart bin added into the mix here. Will it actually help enough, or will it just sort of sit there and influence the people who happen to use it? Or does that influence spread through the community? That awareness that you get from that interaction, does that create some kind of domino inspiration and education effect? Those are things that we could actually test out, measure, and then help us decide, yeah, we want more of these, or no, this is not really a good idea. It's not really going to do enough. We need to focus on other things. So that's a little bit about agent-based modeling and my research. So if anybody wants to chat about that, please come and see me after. Thanks.
Thanks, Faisal.
Well, I guess that's a wrap.
That's a wrap, huh?
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Okay. Well, everyone should stick around. There's still some food up there, and obviously you should be playing Waste Invaders, obviously. And we're going to close up the Zoom and the live stream now, but just a reminder, this remains available on our YouTube channel. You should revisit it. You should share it. Have a great afternoon. All right.